Welcome to the Grants Portal Closeout. This presentation will provide an overview of the Closeout functionality in Grants Portal that will be updated due to EMMIE decommissioning. As EMMIE is decommissioned and legacy events are fully migrated to the Grants Manager and Grants Portal, they will become the system of record and EMMIE will no longer be updated. During this presentation, we're going to talk about the steps for Closeout. As mentioned earlier, we are going to review the functionality in Grants Portal for Closeout with the decommissioning of EMMIE. Please be aware that you may not have access to some of this functionality unless your event has already been migrated from EMMIE to the Grants Portal, or if you are working an event that was declared after January 15th of 2024. We're providing this webinar now so that you can prepare for that migration. We are going to discuss final reconciliation and closeout. Closeout begins at different times depending on whether the public assistance staff are closing out projects, closing out subrecipients or applicants, or closing out the recipient and the overall PA event or grant. Applicants are going to enter the closeout phase once all of their projects have been obligated and all work associated with those projects is complete. Recipients enter the closeout phase once all of their applicants, sometimes referred to as subrecipients during this presentation, you'll see us refer to them in both ways. After all of those applicants and subrecipients have been closed out, and all of the recipient's own projects have been closed out. The overall grant enters the closeout phase once all three of the conditions above are met and the recipient submits their final SF 425 federal financial report. Project closeout requires FEMA, the recipients, and applicants to all work together to complete the process. During closeout, overruns and underruns will be processed. Any requests for information or RFIs will be coordinated with the applicants and recipients. Final costs will be reconciled, and any use of excess funds that's identified for 428 alternative procedures projects will be managed, and then management costs will be reconciled. Final closures actually achieved by ensuring that the applicant completed the approved scope of work within the approved timeline and also complied with all project conditions to include environmental and historic preservation, procurement, disposition and salvage value, insurance requirements, and any other requirements that is triggered by the particular situation. As you can see in this slide, individuals in the following roles can request project closeout: the applicant's primary or alternate PA coordinator, the recipient's authorized representative, the recipient's organizational admin, or on the FEMA side, the PA branch chief or the closeout lead. While all of these will have system rights, we recommend that the request be submitted by the applicant. This is the project closeout process workflow. Notice the different levels that can be involved in the process. On the next few slides, we are going to show you how the applicant and recipient parts of the process work, but I wanted to show you the breakdown for the FEMA side here. After the applicant submits a request for closeout, it is reviewed by the recipient and then goes to the FEMA regional closeout lead. Ultimately, there are three paths that the project may take to get to complete and reconcile. The closeout lead reviews the project to determine if a version is required. If not, the project will go directly to EHP review, unless it's a Cat Z management cost project, which those will go directly to complete and reconcile. If a version is required, a closeout specialist will be assigned who will create the version and can update the costs and add any supporting documentation. If the closeout specialist needs more information, they can do a request for information at this point. Once the project is updated, it will have to be peer reviewed. Once a peer review is done, the project will go through a series of compliance reviews. If it's permanent work, it goes to mitigation and then to insurance. Emergency work will go directly to insurance. After insurance, the project will go through EHP compliance review. The version leads to the final two paths. If the project is more than $1 million, it will need to go to the large project notification queue. Then any additional obligations or de-obligations will be done, and it'll go to complete and reconcile. If it is less than $1 million, the obligations and de-obligations will be done, and it'll go to complete and reconcile. So within the grants portal, to request a project closeout, you're going to go to My Organization, and on the project page, you should have a button that says Request Closeout. When you select that button, you will get a pop-up window that says, are you sure you want to begin the closeout process? So requesting closeout is how this starts. Once you request the closeout, you will open up the closeout report. Now, at the closeout report, there is a button that says Certify and Submit. It may be that your Certify and Submit button is grayed out. That means that at least one of the requirements for certifying and submitting has not been met. Now, it could be that your completion date has not been updated. It could be that you have not added final expenditures. It could be that there are some EHP conditions or insurance conditions that need to be met. We will show you now how to identify what you are missing. If you hover over the Certify and Submit button, a drop-down window will appear that will show you why this button is disabled. So in this example, it tells you the final expenditures for the project has not been identified. We're going to go through in the next few slides some of the reasons that may appear, and we're going to discuss how to resolve those. So one of the first things that may appear is that your completion date has not been entered. There is a handy button at the top of your screen that is Edit Completion Date. This is what you will go to make sure that that date has been updated correctly. Next, you may have a message that your final expenditures have not been added. There is a bar within the project that will allow you to click the Manage button, and there you can enter your final expenditures. There is also a bar that has EHP conditions. If you have to certify an EHP condition, you will have buttons within that bar that allow you to do that. We'll get into more detail on each of those now. So to edit your completion date, as I mentioned, you can see up right beside the Certify and Submit button is a button that says Edit Completion Date. This will open a window which will allow you to use the calendar function and select the date that your project is completed. If you select a date that is past the deadline in the system, you will get a yellow message. This message is going to alert you to the fact that a time extension needs to be submitted. Now, you can actually use this link, and when you submit your time extension request, it can be processed simultaneously to closing out your project. So you do not have to stop the closeout process to make that time extension, but you definitely want to make sure that you get that time extension completed. Once you have entered your completion date, you may have to enter a final expenditures amount. So in this, you will scroll down through the bars, and it should be a final extension bar with a Manage button. When you select the Manage button, you will get a pop-up window that will allow you to enter your final expenditures directly into the pop-up box. Once you enter your final expenditures, if that was all of the requirements, then you should get a Certify and Submit button darkened. So you can see now that it is a darker shade of blue, which means you can certify and submit. If you click that button, it will bring up a summary of your report, your project. You will read through, make sure that everything is correct. You will check the box that says you agree. This is that you are making a certification that all of the statements are true, complete, and accurate to the best of your knowledge. Then you will click the button to sign. This will pop up a signature block, and you will enter your name and the password that you use to enter the grants portal system. So once you have entered your name and that password, you will click the sign button. It will sign your closeout report, and then you are able to submit your closeout report. Once again, you will get a confirmation pop-up that you are submitting your closeout report. Once the applicant has submitted a closeout request, the recipient will get the closeout report. The recipient will have 3 buttons. It will have the option to certify and submit, to send it back to the applicant, or to edit the completion date. The recipient must certify and submit the closeout report for it to proceed to FEMA. If they submit, a confirmation pop-up will appear for them to complete their submission. Alternately, they may send it back to the applicant or submit the information themselves. To certify and submit, the recipient must review the closeout report, agree to the conditions just like the applicant did, and sign the closeout report. When they submit, the closeout report will progress to FEMA. Within the grants manager, the closeout lead will get the notification that a closeout report is pending FEMA review. They will then have options to submit the closeout report, send it back to the recipient, or assign a closeout specialist. This is where the closeout lead will make the decision as to whether or not the project needs a version. If the project needs a version, then they will assign the closeout specialist. Closeout specialists can create a closeout version. This will enable them to make edits, do additional reviews of the project, or submit a request for information. It's important to note that an amendment should be made for any scope of work changes prior to starting the closeout. A version should only be made for cost changes. So if a scope of work change is needed, the closeout specialist may decide to cancel the process and let the applicant submit a scope of work change in the format of an amendment. So I mentioned that the closeout specialist may need to get additional information. This can be done by creating a request for information. At this point, they can also identify an eligibility issue, they can upload documents or add comments to the project. If a version is created and the changes are made by the closeout specialist, the project will have to go through peer review. The peer review is going to have all of the same permissions as the closeout specialist. So they're going to be able to review the project, edit the project, and then submit it forward. When they submit it forward, it will either go to mitigation, or if it's an emergency work category A and B project, it will bypass mitigation and go directly to insurance. Once insurance review is complete, the insurance specialist will submit it forward to EHP. Once at EHP, the regional environmental officer and the EHP managers can review and edit the EHP information on the project. If necessary, they can send it to EMMIE to have EHP compliance review, or they can submit it forward to the closeout lead. Once at final review, the closeout lead can review any changes made on the closeout version and make any final edits to the project. When the final review is complete, the closeout lead can submit it forward to the recipient. Alternatively, the closeout lead can send it back to EHP, insurance, mitigation, or even the closeout specialist, depending on anything that they find in that final review. So when the closeout lead sends it to the recipient can review the version that's been created, and they can make any changes that they need on the closeout version. When they are done with their review, then they submit it back to FEMA. Once recipient review is complete and approved, there are the 3 possible tracks that I mentioned to get to final reconciliation. The first one is final closeout review. This is if no cost changes are needed, then it's just can be completed and reconciled by the closeout lead. They are going to make a cost change, but the cost change is keeping the project at less than $1 million. If it's still going to be a small project, then the project will progress to recipient concurrence until the obligation or the deobligation is complete, and then it can be completed and reconciled by the closeout lead. If they're making a cost change and it means that the project is going to be greater than $1 million, then the project has to go through that large project notification queue, so LPN queue, and then it will proceed to recipient concurrence until the obligation or deobligation is complete, and then it can be completed and reconciled by the closeout lead. Once the closeout lead completes and reconciles the closeout report, the project is closed. Now, I do want to mention that there is a small project closeout, which is kind of a bulk closeout. There is an option to select to close small projects. It takes the closeout lead to a screen where they can choose which small projects they would like to close. Then they can select them all, and projects that are closed out using this method proceed directly to the project closed out. So it skips going through many of the other projects. So that's specifically for small projects that are part of a bulk closeout. Once your project is closed out, you should get on your project step the notification that your project is closed out and when it was closed out. Now, I am going to switch over to my grants portal and grants manager and go through this simultaneously so you can see the process, not just in the slideshow. So within the grants portal, when you log in and select your organization, this view is actually a recipient view, and I'm going to go through this so I can show you both what it's like to close out as an applicant and the recipient. So I'm going to go to my subrecipient projects pending completion, and I am going to choose the first project that I have that has been obligated so I can close it out. Now, when I select this, you will see that this record, because it has been obligated, has a request closeout button. I'm going to select request closeout. I do not have to enter anything in this box because there's not an asterisk, so I'm just going to go ahead and confirm that I want to request closeout. Once I've requested closeout, I get my closeout report, which includes the certify and submit button. Now you can see that my certified submit button is grayed out. I'm going to hover over that and it gives me the reason. So I have not yet entered my date of work completion and I have not entered the final expenditures for this project. So to close this out, I'm going to go ahead and do those two things. So as I mentioned, right beside the certify and submit button, we have the edit completion date. This makes it handy just to move right over, select edit completion, and choose the date that the work was completed. Now, as I mentioned, if you are selecting a date that is past your deadline, then you will get a message that you need to request a time extension on the project details page. You can use this link to go directly there. As I also said, while you can get this message and go create your time extension, you can continue to close out your project. So I'm going to go ahead and save this date and continue to close out my project. So the other thing that was stopping me from certifying and submitting was that final expenditures for the project. So now I'm going to scroll down within my project page and look for the final expenditures. So here is my final expenditures bar, and on that bar I have the option to manage. So I'm going to select manage. This is going to bring me a pop-up window where I can actually enter the final expenditures. Once I've entered that amount, I'm going to save. So now you can see that I have the option to certify and submit. Before I certify and submit, I'm going to make sure that I have uploaded any final documentation that I need to support my project. So if I have something to upload, I'm going to come down to this additional supporting documentation bar, and I upload this documentation. You can use the drag and drop feature, or you can select and find a document. That will allow you to upload. Once everything is uploaded that you need, then you are going to certify and submit. So I'm going to go ahead and certify and submit this. So I have my closeout report, and I will review through the whole project. Once I am satisfied that all information has been uploaded and is correct to the best of my knowledge, I'm going to click that agree button. And then I am going to sign. Now, after I enter my name, I enter the same password that I entered to get into Grants Portal. I'm going to sign my document, and then I get my darkened submit closeout report. Once again, I will get a pop-up to ensure that I want to do it. And now you can see that the yellow brick road says this closeout report is pending recipient review. The recipient goes through the same process as the applicant does. So the recipient can select certify and submit. They will review all of the information in the closeout report. Once they review, they will agree that it is the truth and complete to the best of their knowledge, and then they will also sign. They will enter their password for the Grants Portal, and then they will have the option to submit a closeout report. Once they submit, the project is going to go to the grants manager. So now I'm going to go over to the grants manager and I'm going to show you what happens on our side. Once I enter the grants manager, I can search for my project. Once I find the project that I am looking for, I can drill into that project. It will give me the yellow brick road that says this project is pending closeout completion. At this point, I can view the closeout report. I will select the closeout report, and you can see that I have the option to submit the closeout report, to send it back to the recipient, or to assign a closeout specialist. Now, if a cost must be changed, then I'm going to assign a closeout specialist, and that is going to allow them to create a closeout version, change the cost, and then it will go through that stair-step process of review. Alternately, cost has not changed. If the report is correct, then I can submit the closeout report. I can make a comment, and then it gets the option to complete and reconcile the report. So that is the stages in the backside with the grants manager. Now I'm going to go back and talk about applicant and event closeout. So once all of the applicant's projects have been closed out, then the applicant can be closed out themselves. So there will be a window that says request closeout at the applicant event profile page. When you select that, it will give you a warning. The warning is to make sure that there are no damages that are unassigned to projects. If there are damages that have not been assigned to projects, then they need to be withdrawn. It will make sure that there are no open work orders. It will make sure that there are no open work order requests. So once all of these things are done, then you can request closeout. As a note, as you can see on the screen, before an applicant can be closed out, the RTM must be completed and the field staff must be transitioned to either the region or the processing center. So once the applicant has submitted to be closed out, then the recipient has the option to approve the applicant's closeout or reject the applicant closeout. They will get a pop-up and will have to confirm their choice. Once all applicants have been closed out and the recipient's own projects have been closed out, then there is the event closeout. So this happens at the recipient level. The recipient can request closeout and it will begin the request closeout process. The request will go to FEMA. FEMA will then have the option to either reject the request or process the request. If they are going to approve event closeout, then they will have to upload the SF-424 federal form. Once they have uploaded that document, it will mark that it has been provided and will allow FEMA to approve event closeout. If FEMA decides to reject the event closeout, then the event will remain open. So that is all that we have for today. As I mentioned, these slides can also be found in the grants portal.
Now for some closing slides. Here are some resources. Today we discussed the Public Assistance Program and Policy Guide, also known as our PAPA G. Please remember to use the version that was in place at the time the event was declared. There's the Code of Federal Regulations website. If you have any policy-specific questions, you can contact FEMA's headquarters policy branch at the email listed here. Don't forget to check out the Grants Portal Support Center. You can find additional job aids and fact sheets, as well as a copy of this presentation. And if any of our state, local, tribe, or territory partners would like to request additional training, please coordinate with your regional offices. Regional offices can request training from the Learning and Development Branch by sending an email listed here, and please identify your organization that you are associated with in your email. If you are not familiar with the Grants Portal Grants Manager YouTube channel, here are some basic videos that you can check out. It has basic navigation, dashboards, widgets, and tiles. If you can't remember how to make that activity completion deadline tile, you can go and review those videos. We also have our recipient and subrecipient Grants Portal user manuals. We are constantly adding additional videos here, so feel free to check back regularly for updated trainings. And we also are going to be working on our Grants Portal user manuals, so check out the support center for those updates coming up later this year. Assistance can be provided via the Grants Portal Customer Service Hotline. So you can reach out to them at the following information. You can call them, you can send an email. Their national hotline hours are 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Friday. And then we have our personally identifiable information, PII warning, in accordance with the Privacy Act of 1974, 5 U.S.C. 552A. Please ensure that any sensitive personally identifiable information, PII, has been removed or redacted prior to uploading any files. This includes social security numbers, birth dates, financial account information, home addresses, or similar information. To report corruption, waste, fraud, abuse, mismanagement, and misconduct, you can reach out to our DHS Office of Inspector General at the phone number listed here, or you can send them a letter at their address. We have our procurement guidance, our PDAT Procurement Disaster Assistance Team. If you have any questions regarding procurement, please feel free to reach out to them. You can also go to FEMA.gov/grants/procurement for more information. Thank you very much for attending. Have a great day.